forces from all the populated areas of Gaza, and the release of a number of hostages held by Hamas, including women and elderly and the wounded. And I'm proud to say Americans will be part of that hostage release in phase 1 as well. And the Vice President and I cannot wait to welcome them home. In exchange, Israel released hundreds of Palestinian prisoners. And during phase 1, the Palestinians can also return to their neighborhoods in all the areas of Gaza.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke with US President Joe Biden and President-elect Donald Trump on Wednesday to thank them for their help securing the deal.
The office of Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu cautioned that some issues in the framework remained unresolved, though it expressed hope that the details will be finalized soon. The agreement came after months of negotiations and days ahead of the inauguration of Biden's successor, Trump.
The US President-elect hailed the deal even before it was officially announced by the White House. Envoys from both Trump's incoming administration and Biden's outgoing one had been present at the latest negotiations. When asked if he or incoming President Donald Trump is to take credit for the Gaza ceasefire deal, President Joe Biden responded, "Is that a joke?"
Thank you.
Folks, credit for this, Mr. President, you or Trump?
Is that a joke? Oh, thank you.
Demonstrators in Tel Aviv calling for the release of the hostages embraced as news of the agreement spread. Thousands across Gaza celebrated the reported deal.
Palestinians across the world celebrated as the news broke that negotiators reached a phased deal to end the war in Gaza.
All right, there's more to discuss here. We're now being joined by Dr. Abner Cohen from Monterey, California. Dr. Cohen is a professor of non-proliferation and terrorism studies, Middlebury Institute. Dr. Cohen, thank you so much for joining us here on the broadcast. Mediators say that the success of the deal would depend on Israel and Hamas acting in good faith. How stable or volatile do you feel this deal will remain now?
I think the first stage is reasonably stable. Israel needs it. Hamas needs as long as possible the ceasefire. I think the second one is quite questionable, whether it will come to that. The reason is that Israel would not tolerate, and no government in Israel can accept keeping the Hamas government in Gaza, or some kind of Hamas governance in Gaza. And the question is, what kind of mechanism and to what extent, what kind of distance it will be taken from Hamas that Israel would be ready to leave Gaza in a permanent way, to end the war in the full sense of the word.
Right. Now, Dr. Cohen, just to expand on that, of course, the number of Palestinian prisoners to be released in the second and the third phases would also depend on this first phase and to be finalized during these initial 42 days. Does that make these next 6 weeks the most crucial then?
Yeah, as you know, the negotiation over the next phase is going to start after 16 days, essentially a little bit more than 2 weeks. And it's going to be a tough one. I think for the Hamas, it's very important to show that even though they were devastating militarily, and the Gaza itself, the whole strip, is essentially in wreckage, they were able still to resist what they call the sumud in Arabic, the resistance, and to remain the dominant power. For Israel, it's unacceptable to allow that. So it's going to be a tough negotiation on that.
Dr. Cohen, the ceasefire deal, the announcement came just hours before that farewell speech, and of course the Israeli Prime Minister's office has also cautioned that some issues in that framework remain unresolved. They're hopeful it will get resolved soon. Do you reckon that there was some rush to get into the hostage, the ceasefire deal? Have they rushed into it without resolving all issues? Or do you feel that resolving all issues isn't possible? They had to get to some stage first.
It was very clear that the deal had to start just before President Trump take office. There is no question that it was a direct connection between the inauguration of the new president and the beginning of the deal. The deal had to start before that. Both sides wanted it, the Biden administration, the new incoming administrations, and Netanyahu was pressed very, very much. Normally, I don't think that it would be enough. There was enough to have the deal. Yes, so it was rushed, and Netanyahu had to comply.
It was rushed and he had to comply. Of course, some issues remain unresolved, but sides are hopeful. And of course, both sides are rejoicing. We see Palestinians around the world rejoicing, and of course, everyone in Tel Aviv, around Israel, also happy with the announcement. Thank you so much for joining us. There will be a lot to discuss especially in these next 6 weeks and during the first phase of this ceasefire, because that will determine what comes next in phase 2 and phase 3. That was Dr. Avner Cohen joining us on World DNA.
Thank you.
All right, we move further from here. Now, outgoing US President Joe Biden delivered a farewell address to the nation, his 5th and final address from the Oval Office, just days before President-elect Donald Trump takes over.
Right, and of course, as we know, that will happen on the 20th of January. And touting his accomplishments at home and abroad, Biden said in the past 4 years, he kept his commitment to be president for all Americans after the country went through a tough 4 years with the pandemic, inheriting an economic crisis.
It will take time to feel the full impact of all we've done together. But the seeds are planted, and they'll grow and they'll bloom for decades to come. At home, we've created nearly 17 million new jobs, more than any other single administration, single term. More people have health care than ever before. And overseas, we've strengthened NATO. Ukraine is still free, and we've pulled ahead of our competition with China. And so much more. I'm so proud of how much we've accomplished together for the American people. And I wish the incoming administration success, because I want America to succeed. That's why I've held my duty to ensure a peaceful and orderly transition of power, to ensure we lead by the power of our example.
Joe Biden called for maintaining fair government, issuing a warning for the next 4 years. He said it was important to safeguard democratic institutions, holding the government accountable and keeping alive the American democracy.
But all of it's on the night. That democracy must defend and be defined and be imposed, moved in every way possible. Our rights, our freedoms, our dreams. But we know the idea of America, our institution, our people, our values that uphold it are constantly being tested. Ongoing debates about power and the exercise of power. But whether we lead by the example of our power or the power of our example. Whether we show the courage to stand up to the abuse of power or we yield to it. After 50 years at the center of all of this, I know that believing in the idea of America means respecting the institutions that govern a free society. The presidency, the Congress, the courts, a free and independent press, institutions that are rooted.
President Joe Biden warned that an oligarchy is taking shape in America, saying a dangerous concentration of power in the hands of a few individuals threatens the United States democracy.
Today, an oligarchy is taking shape in America of extreme wealth, power, and influence that literally threatens our entire democracy, our basic rights and freedoms, and a fair shot for everyone to get ahead.
As Republican Donald Trump prepares to return to the White House in a few days, Biden warned that Americans are succumbing to misinformation and that press freedoms are deteriorating.
President Biden
I'm equally concerned about the potential rise of a tech industrial complex that could pose real dangers for our country as well. Americans are being buried under an avalanche of misinformation and disinformation, enabling the abuse of power. The free press is crumbling. Editors are disappearing. Social media is giving up on fact-checking. The truth is smothered by lies told for power and for profit. We must hold the social platforms accountable to protect our children, our families, and our very democracy from the abuse of power.
President Biden also took credit for the ceasefire in Gaza, saying Israel-Hamas deal was developed and negotiated by his administration.
After 8 months of nonstop negotiation, my administration, a ceasefire and a hostage deal has been reached by Israel and Hamas, the elements of which I laid out in great detail in May of this year. This plan was developed and negotiated by my team and will be largely implemented by the incoming administration. That's why I told my team to keep the incoming administration fully informed, because that's how it should be, working together as Americans.
All right, for more on this, our correspondent Susan Tehrani is joining us live from New York. Hi, Susan. First things first, your key takeaways from that speech.
Yeah, those were really important sound bites that we just heard you play. You know, with everything that Biden says, we can really talk about it and analyze it, but there's no doubt that this speech comes in the backdrop of the fact that, first of all, he doesn't want to leave Washington in office. He didn't want to step aside as a contender in the 2024 presidential election. And he recently said that had he been the candidate, he would have beat President-elect Donald Trump. So really, it comes at a time when most Americans know this. We know this. Our viewers around the world know this, that he was sort of put aside by his own party, if not by the majority of Americans who didn't vote for him. That being said, you know, there is no doubt that a lot of the things that he mentioned, while his supporters will say it was a warning, it was the right warning, it just was out of touch with what many Americans have experienced during the past 4 years and what they're seeing now and what they're looking for the future of the country. Usually farewell speeches, starting with with George Washington, the founding father of the United States, is a time for optimism, hope, looking forward, and perhaps, you know, some warnings. But to compare the tech industry here in the United States to the military-industrial complex and call it the tech-industrial complex, like President Eisenhower did, is a step too far. And I think that's where, you know, he lost many of the Americans who were watching, were hoping, you know, for a hopeful message of transfer of power, you know, talking about censorship, misinformation, not having guardrails on social media. Those are things that many Americans just don't want anymore. And they saw that and they pushed back on it because of the Biden administration. First of all, stifling free speech on social media platforms like Meta, as Mark Zuckerberg recently said, regarding his own son's laptop. The Hunter Biden laptop story was basically kept in the dark during the 2020 election. And then about COVID and other issues. So the censorship was one of the reasons why Biden or Kamala Harris actually lost, and the Democrats have lost the majority of the people. And for him to come and say, you know, be careful, there's going to be no guardrails on social media, it almost appears that he doesn't trust the American people to make their own judgments and their own decisions. And he's sort of alluding to that, which is, again, something that wasn't to the benefit of the Democrat Party. Nonetheless, again, just in a nutshell, it was very far off with what many Americans are feeling right now.
Susan, now another point that he mentioned, which I'm seeking clarity on, is he said an oligarchy is taking shape in America, a dangerous concentration of power. My question is, who is he really referring to here?
That's exactly what I had in mind as well. Oligarchy, that word that's really stood out and made headlines all over. Your take on that?
Yeah, that is the headline grabbing one, and it just depends who's reporting for it and about it. You know, those that are close to the Democratic Party here in the United States are really touting that as a very important warning. But again, you know, the majority of people and those that are not, you know, supporting the president or the Democrat Party are talking about, you know, what is he talking about? Does he want more censorship? Is that where the Democrat Party is leading? It's no doubt that he was talking about Elon Musk with his purchase of X. Then you do have Mark Zuckerberg recently. He has donated a large amount to the Trump library as well. And then the inauguration, and in the front row of the inauguration of President-elect Donald Trump, you're going to see Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, and Elon Musk sitting right next to each other, next to politicians. So I think that was sort of something that he was alluding to.
Yeah, it really ties into that tech industrial complex that you mentioned earlier.
So that we've heard now.
Yes. All right, Susan. Thanks so much for getting us the latest and, you know, really breaking it down on what it had and what it didn't. That was the farewell speech by Biden. Thank you so much, Susan. That was Susan Tehrani joining us from New York.
Thank you.
Well, U.S. House Speaker Mike Johnson has announced that U.S. flags will fly at full staff at the Capitol during Donald Trump's presidential inauguration.
And this will pause the 30-day flag lowering order following the demise of former President Jimmy Carter. And earlier, the President, Joe Biden, ordered the flags to be at half staff for 30 days following December 29th, the decision which Trump criticized and in a post on social media accused the Democrats of being giddy about the solemn tribute because, quote-unquote, they don't love our country.
Now, President Joe Biden's press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, responded by insisting that the White House would not reverse the plan, but Mike Johnson, who leads the Republican majority as Speaker of the House, relented. Johnson, in a statement, also added that after the inauguration, the flags will be lowered back to half-staff the next day to continue honoring former President Jimmy Carter.
Trump has already taken action over the flags that he can control at his home in Florida. In the days following Carter's burial, a large U.S. flag at Trump's private Mar-a-Lago estate was observed already flying at its full height despite an order from Florida Governor Ron DeSantis that mirrors Biden's.
Meanwhile, former First Lady Michelle Obama will not be attending Trump's inauguration next month. A statement from the office of Barack and Michelle Obama did not specify any reason for her absence, but also stated that the former President Barack Obama will be in attendance.
Now, this will be the second time in 2 weeks that she is not a part of a gathering of former U.S. leaders and their spouses. And she was also not present during the state funeral of former President Jimmy Carter in Washington last week. Michelle Obama was the only spouse absent at last week's funeral, where her husband and Trump were seated next to each other and chatted and laughed like old friends, despite the history of political animosity between the Democratic former president and the returning Republican. The former First Lady campaigned against Trump during his 2016, 2020 and 2024 presidential campaigns.
All right, with that, it's time to slip into a short break, but we're leaving you with all the climate stories making headlines across the globe today. Do stay tuned.
India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION. World is one.
The biggest gathering of humanity on the planet.
This is quite an interesting spot.
WION brings you exclusive coverage from the ground of the Mahakumbh Mela.
These bikes will be patrolling all around.
From security to infrastructure. From tent city to Sangam. We've got you covered.
This is Triveni Sangam, where Ganga, Yamuna and the mythical Saraswati rivers meet.
Experience faith. Experience culture.
Tent as well.
Experience Mahakumbh. Only on WION. World is one.
Amid escalating violence in the eastern regions of the Democratic Republic of Congo, the Congolese army announces significant military gains against the M23 rebel group, with Rwanda's Paul Kagame calling for dialogue. Benin celebrates Vodun Days, a festival centered around the arts, culture and spirituality of the voodoo cult, where women are the mainstay of the festivities. And Senegal aims to promote their culture using toys like traditional wrestler figurines or dolls that come in a wide range of skin tones, including albino. That's this week on World of Africa. At these times on WION, World is one. Amid escalating violence in the eastern regions of the Democratic Republic of Congo, the Congolese army announces significant military gains against the M23 rebel group, with Rwanda's Paul Kagame calling for dialogue. Benin celebrates Vodun Days, a festival centered around the arts, culture and spirituality of the voodoo cult, where women are the mainstay of the festivities. And Senegal aims to promote their culture using toys like traditional wrestler figurines or dolls that come in a wide range of skin tones, including albino. That's this week on World of Africa. At these times on WION, World is one.
Welcome back to World DNA. Thank you so much for staying with us. Lots lined up for you on this side of the show. Let's get started with the headlines first.
After 8 months of non-stop negotiation, my administration, a ceasefire and a hostage deal has been reached by Israel and Hamas.
Qatar and the US announced ceasefire and hostage release deal between Israel and Hamas. 6 weeks of ceasefire in phase 1 of the agreement to take effect on Sunday.
Gaza residents celebrate ceasefire announcement. Families and friends of hostages celebrate ceasefire deal in Tel Aviv.
An oligarchy is taking shape in America of extreme wealth, power, and influence that literally threatens our entire democracy.
In his farewell address, President Joe Biden warns about a tech-industrial complex, says a dangerous oligarchy is taking shape in America, and concentration of power in the hands of a few individuals threatens U.S. democracy.
South Korea's impeached President Yoon Suk-yeol to skip questioning today for health reasons, a day after his dramatic arrest over a failed martial law bid.
Schools in Delhi NCR ordered to shift to hybrid mode for classes up to 9th and 11th, and this is after implementation of the Graded Response Action Plan 4 GRAP 4 rules due to the increasing pollution levels.
Arsenal remain hot on the heels of Liverpool in English Premier League. The Gunners moved to within 4 points of the leaders with a 2-1 win over Tottenham Hotspur in North London derby.
Today is day 3 of the Mahakumbh festival, the sacred confluence of Ganga, Yamuna and Saraswati rivers. Triveni Sangam is attracting millions of devotees every day.
Our special correspondent Johan Castell, who is on the ground, brings you this next report. Take a look.
We are on the ground in Prayagraj right now for day 3 of the Mahakumbh Mela festival. On day 1, there were 17 million people who attended. On day 2, Chief Minister of Uttar Pradesh, Yogi Adityanath, stated that 35 million people attended for the first Amrit Snan, or royal bath. Today is day 3, so we are in the juicy area right now to hear what people have to say about it. With Divyansh. So, Divyansh, how are you finding Kumbh Mela? How is it here?
It's good and it feels like I'm in a spiritual palace.
Yeah? You had a lot of fun today?
Yeah, I have fun today.
Yeah. Did you go to the bathing ghat yesterday?
Bathing?
Did you go for dipping in the Triveni Sangam yesterday?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I got there.
How was it? Was there a lot of people there?
Yeah, but not like... But yesterday there were a lot of people there, but not today.
Oh, you went there today also, but there was no people there.
No, there were few people, but there were... I just put my hand and legs today, but I bathed yesterday.
Oh, yesterday you went dipping on the auspicious day.
With my family.
Your whole family went inside.
Yeah.
विश्व में शायद किसी भी शहर में इतनी जनसंख्या नहीं होगी जितनी यहाँ पर ये हमारे भगवान की कृपा से इतनी यहाँ पर जनता इकट्ठी है। विश्व का सबसे बड़ा शहर बना हुआ है हमारा प्रयाग कुंभ और भगवान की बहुत असीम अनुकंपा है कि हम सभी लोग बहुत आनंदित हैं और बहुत ही खुश हैं।
My first feeling in my life because so very different in Japan. Culture and religion. And history of people, fashion, more everything is different. Because I want to see Kumbh Mela, because come to Kumbh Mela. and my most impact in my life in Kumbh Mela.
There you have it.
Now, India has just 33 years or just over one generation left until it becomes as old as today's advanced economies.
Stating this, a McKinsey demographics analysis emphasizes how important it is for India to become wealthy before it ages. The research says India's GDP per capita is only 18% of the high-income benchmark, despite significant progress.
India's total fertility rate, according to the report, is 1.98 children per woman. That is less than the replacement rate of 2.1 according to a UN estimate. India's population would reach a peak of 1.7 billion people in 2061 and then decline thereafter. Under current projections, by the end of the century, India will have more than twice as many people as China. According to the McKenzie Report, the shift in the Indian demography will result in slower economic growth. It says that from 1997 to 2023, India's beneficial demographics added 0.7 percentage points per year to the GDP per capita growth. It predicts that through 2050, the advantage will shrink to just 0.2 percentage points per year.
One way India can delay the negative economic consequences of a demographic shift is by increasing the participation of the female labor force. The report says India can benefit from being increasingly important for the world. While today it represents 9% of global consumption, this is expected to rise to 16% by 2050. Meta, along with other major corporations, are making headlines once again with plans for significant layoffs.
These job cuts come as part of broader trends in the corporate world to streamline operations and cut costs amid rapid technological advancements.
Meta, the parent company of Facebook, Instagram and WhatsApp, is planning to let go of approximately 3,600 employees, and that's around 5% of its total workforce. CEO Mark Zuckerberg has called this part of the company's Year of Efficiency initiative aimed at raising performance standards and optimizing costs. In an internal memo, Zuckerberg stated, I'm going to quote here, "I've decided to raise the bar on performance management and move out low performers faster." Now, this move aligns with Meta's goal to achieve a 10% non-regrettable attrition rate by the end of the current performance cycle. Affected employees will receive what Meta is calling generous severance packages. As of September, Meta employed approximately 72,400 people. Over the last 2 years, the company has already cut over 21,000 jobs.
Now, Meta's move is part of a larger wave of layoffs hitting the corporate sector, with companies across tech, media and finance slimming down their workforces. So, which other companies are planning cuts in 2025? Leading the charge in workforce reductions is BlackRock, the global asset management giant. It plans to cut 1% of its workforce, impacting around 200 employees. However, the company has also added 3,750 workers last year and expects to hire an additional 2,000 this year.
Meanwhile, Bridgewater Associates, the world's largest hedge fund, may cut 7% of its staff, approximately 90 employees, that is. Insiders say this decision brings the company's headcount back to 2023 levels. Tech titan Microsoft has also hinted at imminent layoffs, with the company signaling it is taking a closer look at underperforming employees. Specific numbers haven't been disclosed, but Microsoft's spokesperson emphasized the company's focus on high-performance talent.
It's not just tech and media feeling the pinch. Other industries like financial services are also streamlining their operations. Ally Financial, a digital financial services firm, announced it is laying off around 500 employees, which is less than 5% of its workforce. While Ally is downsizing in some areas, it is also hiring in others, emphasizing a strategy of rebalancing resources.
Zuckerberg lost over 19 million Facebook.
Now, according to a prominent Chinese economist, China's economy remains on course to surpass that of the United States within the next decade.
Now, Justin Linfew, who served as the World Bank's chief economist from 2008 to 2012, said that China could outpace the US by 2030 or by 2035 at the latest, based on market exchange rates. Speaking at the Asian Financial Forum in Hong Kong, Lin noted that while China's GDP growth has slowed to 5%, it still far exceeds the US growth rate of 2.5%. Lin stressed that China's economic strengths in artificial intelligence, big data and manufacturing provide a competitive edge on the global stage. Now, Lin's assessment aligns with recent data. In 2023, China's economy grew by 5.2%, nearly doubling the US growth rate of 2.9%. However, US President Joe Biden dismissed the notion of China overtaking the US economy, claiming that updated forecasts suggest this will never happen. This sharp contrast in predictions reflects ongoing competition between the world's two largest economies. Lin also argues that even with challenges, China's domestic market, large talent pool and emerging industries position it to maintain steady growth. He also projects that China's per capita GDP could reach half of the US level by 2049, potentially doubling the US economy by mid-century.
China's National Bureau of Statistics is set to release 2024 GDP data this week. Growth is expected to align with the government's target of around 5%. Lin emphasized that while challenges persist, including geopolitical tensions and global economic uncertainty, China has mechanisms to counter them. Referring to an old Chinese proverb, he stated, "Every challenge has a countermeasure." Lin believes China's economy still has the potential to grow at 8% annually under favorable conditions, but can sustain at least 5% growth in the near term. This resilience, Lin argues, underscores China's long-term trajectory to becoming a global economic leader.
All right, over to technology next. The European Union digital chief, Anna Verkunen, said that yesterday that the European Commission will fully enforce its rules governing social media and large online platforms. Refuting the reports that the EU was delaying investigations into big tech players like Apple, Meta and Google, she asserted that the probes were still in a technical phase, which includes exchanges with companies, before decisions could be taken. Referring to the Digital Markets Act, which imposes antitrust obligations, and the Digital Services Act, which covers content moderation, she said that there haven't been any delays and both acts will be fully enforced.
Can AI improve our understanding of animals and consequently help us reconnect with nature? Well, the Earth Species Project, or the ESP, hopes to decode other creatures' communications with its pioneering artificial intelligence tools. Though the goal is not to build a translator that will allow us to speak to other species, the possibility of rudimentary dictionaries for animals will certainly help in crafting better conservation strategies, leading to humanity's reconnection with often forgotten ecosystems. Potential beneficiaries of this endeavour could be animal groups threatened by habitat loss or human activity. Given the pressing issue of climate change, an improved interspecies understanding will foster greater appreciation for the planet.
A set of artificial intelligence traffic cameras put up on the 3024 Northam Bridge in the port city of Southampton, UK, has been hacked barely hours after it was installed on Tuesday. In the notorious incident early on Wednesday, the pole holding the new equipment was sliced through, resulting in the T-shaped camera mount to topple and smash. AI cameras can capture drivers using mobile phones or not wearing seatbelts as well, when besides calculating how fast they are going. Drivers violating the traffic rules are slapped with penalty points, fines and might even end up losing their license.
Now Arsenal are back in the English Premier League title race. The Gunners overcame Tottenham Hotspur 2-1 in the North London derby to move within 4 points of leaders Liverpool.
Mikel Arteta's side were desperate for a win after being knocked out of the FA Cup by Manchester United at the Emirates Stadium. Arsenal were aiming to arrest their slump, which saw them win just one of their last 4 matches, but they suffered an early blow. Spurs captain Son.
Very proud of the team. I think we were sensational. I think it was a good test to see after 2 big performances and not getting rewarded in 2 different competitions. You have to play the biggest game of the season for our people in those conditions. And it's a test of attitude, you know, what we are made of, the courage that we have, how much we really care only about a result or the performance, and how much we can do in terms of what is required.